update, and we appreciate the generosity of his time. For the new members, Senator Fellman is the Vice Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. He represents District 15 in Montgomery County. Truly one of the more, and I don't say this because he's on the call, but he's truly one of the highly respected members of the General Assembly. Brings a great deal of knowledge and expertise to the General Assembly. He's an attorney and a CPA, has served numerous leadership positions. And I think in Maryland, we're fortunate to have him serving all of us in the Maryland State Senate. So, Brian, I forwarded some questions to you. I don't know if you received them or not, but you know, we were.
I'll you know, let me just say,
Go ahead, sure.
Yeah, I mean, you did throw me some questions. I'll try to weave them into kind of my comments. Well, first of all, it's hard to believe it's been 2 months since we had the last call, and you know, time flies. And I just want to say to the association, it's always been supportive of me and Dennis. Just to give Dennis a shout out, Dennis does a great job representing you all in Annapolis. I think the last time we talked, actually, it was funny. We were talking about mortgages and mortgage brokers, and I think I said at that call that I was in the middle of a back and forth over a purchase of a new home for myself, and I got outbid because the real estate market was so hot here in Montgomery County. I made one offer, and there was like, I was already in competition with 10 other people. So here, it's also timely. I actually, 2 months later, as this weekend, I actually now have a ratified contract on a new house. So taking advantage of those historic low mortgage rates, I now have to sell my current house, but I at least have, and I'll be moving, Dennis, if all this works out, literally the first week of session. So I'll be house and starting session at the same time. But you know, let me just say, just big picture, you know, thinking from the comments I made in August about the historic nature of the year, you know, we had 2 new presiding officers, new Senate president, a new Speaker of the House, again, replacing folks who were the longest serving Speaker and Senate president in the history of Maryland. So this year we had new presiding officers, a lot of, I think, uncertainty. And then you throw in us adjourning for the first time since the Civil War. Another kind of new development just in the last week or so is we're going to have new leadership in the Senate on the Republican side. So 2 members of my committee, Steve Hershey and J.B. Jennings, were the #1 and 2 Republicans in the state Senate. And I apologize if there's a dog barking in the background. But Steve and JB were members of the Finance Committee and are still, as of this date, still members of the Finance Committee. But they had a new leadership election in the Republican caucus, and the new Republican leaders starting in 2021 are going to be Brian Simon Eyre from Anne Arundel County will be the new minority leader, and Mike Huff from Frederick County will be the new minority whip. So that's a pretty dramatic shift in terms of, we'll have to see, of course, but their styles, I think Dennis would be up the styles of Simon Eyre and Huff are a little bit different than Jennings and Hershey. So that, you know, is a pretty dramatic shift, I think, in terms of how we do business in the Senate. As far as how we're going to actually do business in the Senate starting January. So last time there was still, when we met, there was uncertainty about a special session. Obviously, that is not happening. We're going full blown to a regular session in January. When I say regular, it's not going to be all that regular. We're going to have hearings, bill hearings, just like this, where witnesses like Dennis will be appearing like this. We're not going to have live witnesses. You know, it's going to be different. In the chamber, we're going to really be limited to the time we spend in the Senate chamber. We're going to have, for those of you who are like NHL, you know, the NHL, we're going to have almost like little penalty boxes, plexiglass penalty boxes between us, and same thing probably in the committees. And if things are really bad, then we may actually be appearing like this from our offices in Annapolis into the committee rooms. But the idea of live witnesses is not going to probably be the case. Similarly, I always look forward to the committee dinner that you all host, you know, Harry Brown's. I think we're probably not going to be doing committee dinners for obvious reasons. And so it's just not going to be the same. The senators are all under caps in terms of how many bills we can put in. So the normal year, we have 3,000 bills a year. You're not going to see that this year. It's going to be much more limited. So it's not going to be normal. You know, in terms of the state of things, first of all, later today, I'm actually speaking to AOBA and BOMA. I'm going to be doing a call just like this to kind of gauge apartments, office world in Maryland and how the economy is looking for those guys. And so it's kind of interesting to start the day with you and then be dealing with AOBA and BOMA apartment office folks a little later today to hear what's going on. But we still have a kind of a tale of two worlds. We have folks taking advantage of the low mortgage rates and buying homes and that, and then you have this other world of a lot of people hurting big time. And so in terms of the big issues, I mean, it's right now, every state in the country, not just Maryland, is waiting to see if Congress helps us out with some stimulus rescue package for the states. Because unlike the federal government, I'm going to reiterate, we have a balanced budget requirement in Maryland. We're required by the Constitution to have a balanced budget. We have a AAA bond rating. We're one of only 13 states that can say that, but our sales tax, our revenue have taken a hit. In all candor, our tax revenues are better than we thought they would be and better than most of the country, but still moving forward, if we get no relief from Congress in Maryland, we probably have to lay off 25% of our state workforce, meaning firefighters. That includes firefighters, police, school teachers. And so from a national perspective, really, again, I'll reiterate a point I made in August, hard to see us getting out of the economic downturn with that kind of layoffs around the country, not just, this is not a Maryland specific issue. So keep an eye on Congress. It's not going to be happening clearly before the election, but hopefully after the election, we'll see some kind of stimulus. You know, as far as, and you saw Governor Hogan in anticipation of that last week, took $250 million out of our rainy day fund to put it into sort of a series of recommendations that a group that I involved with asked the governor to do. I'm part of a small business caucus, a bipartisan small business caucus of 10 senators. And we've been working with the governor, making recommendations to the governor, one of which was to take some of our rainy day money, of which we still have $950 million, and deploy it towards programs specifically to help a small business. So the governor went ahead and did that last week, released $250 million. And then of that 250, there's about $100 million for an emergency fund, rapid response fund for small businesses. So that hopefully can be helped. I think he could have even gone bigger. Comptroller Francho said he should have done 500 million. We'll see. But the bottom line is that as of today, we're back as good as Maryland has been doing relative to the rest of the country on COVID. Fact is, this past week or two, that's not been the case. So we have inched back. About a month ago, we had about 250 folks in hospitals, COVID related. Now we're back close to 500 just 1 month later. And so we're, like the rest of the country, kind of going backwards to where we were in August and July. And from an economic development standpoint and money and all the rest, that is problematic. So the biggest issue is going to be our state budget. Priority, again, keep an eye on what's happening in Congress. The other big issues that I'm probably going to end up being in the middle of has to do with liability protection for businesses. Probably, you know, we thought that Congress might take a shot at it as part of stimulus, and that may still happen, but I'm not expecting that. So it's going to be left to every state in the country, all 50 states, to deal with, and they may handle it different because the politics are different. What happens if your employee tests positive? What happens if a customer comes into your business and tests positive? Are you going to be subject to some class action litigation and all the rest? Really, really hot topic. And this is one the governor cannot do by executive order. I got an attorney general opinion from Brian Frosch. There was some thought that the governor could give some protection to businesses in Maryland by executive order, which is something that he has done. He has done in other areas. Attorney General told us that no, that will require an act of the legislature. So that's going to be hot. And a related issue has to do with business interruption insurance. You'll see that's playing out around the country. battles between businesses and the insurance industry about whether their business interruption coverage insurance policies cover this situation. And you've got lots of action around the country in that space. In some cases, state legislatures weighing in and requiring that the carriers cover that kind of business protection. And we're going to have issues. They're going to have issues ranging from, when we open the schools, to evictions, to police accountability, to foreclosures. All those things are going to be on the table. And I don't know, where we're heading, but the fact is those are all going to be in front of us when we reconvene in January. Issues that might not seem to be important to this organization, but impact our budget. So all this talk about the Affordable Care Act in the Supreme Court, just remember that if the ACA is thrown out by the Supreme Court as being unconstitutional, yes, the Affordable Care Act would go away, but all the money that we have gotten as a state related to the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid money, federal tax credit money for moderate, low-income people, we would lose all that money. And that we would then have to figure out how are we going to replace that if we want to figure out how to, 500,000 Marylanders could lose their health insurance because it won't be affordable at that point. What will we as a state do to respond? And I chair a commission that's been tasked with actually looking at that. But if we want to do anything, that's going to require money, and that will be a big ticket item as well. Also, we're going to have to deal with the veto overrides, one of which the governor vetoed the so-called Kerwin education blueprint, big ticket item, and he vetoed it. So we'll have to decide, can we afford that? And if not, we'll let the veto stay. But that's the first thing that we have to do when we get back in January. The first item of business under our Constitution is we have to take up any vetoes that the governor did to see if we're going to override. Biggest, hottest issue will be that one, Kerwin. And so keep an eye on that when we reconvene. A lot of issues on healthcare. Dennis, you had asked about regulatory hurdles involving, remote work, telework, employees working in this industry. And that's, I think that, this pandemic has revealed a lot of gaps on everything from, again, telehealth and telework to schools, the issue of connectivity. And so what we kind of have discovered is how poorly we collect data on the connectivity levels around our state. So the feds are supposed to collect data on broadband connectivity, and they don't do a good job. And so what's happened is about 12 states have now created state sort of mechanisms to figure out where in our state we don't have good connectivity. And so I actually have legislation along with Delegate Lukey on the other side that's going to actually, just by way of statistics, so we have about 185,000 Marylanders have no internet at all. Okay, that's one category. But probably the bigger problem is we have about 500,000 Marylanders who have no high-speed internet. Okay, about 500,000 folks, and a big chunk of those people are living in rural Maryland. Okay, the vast majority. And so when you talk about telework, remote employees, you got to start with, everybody's got to be connected. And so we need to know where those gaps are. And I think the Lukey bill, Fellman bill, is going to set up a mechanism for us to collect data to give us a better idea of where the problems are. And I think that's an issue that we even started in the Finance Committee last year on connectivity and infrastructure. And so I'd be interested to hear, Dennis, from when I'm done here in a second, what you see are some regulatory hurdles, but they're big picture. I think that that's a big subject. You had asked me about the Collection Agency Act, the Maryland Collection Agency Act, which Attorney General Frosch has brought in 2 years in a row into the General Assembly. In both cases, that bill did not get out of the Finance Committee. In one case, it did get out of the House, I think in 2019, and then failed in the Senate Finance Committee. Attorney General Frosch then brought it back last year, didn't get out of the Finance Committee. And you want to know what the prospects of of the AG bringing that in again. You know what, only he can answer that. I mean, he was very determined to reverse the Court of Appeals Sharma case. There was a Court of Appeals decision on this whole subject of, licensing and who gets licensed and regulated. And Dennis, I don't want to spend too much time talking about that Court of Appeals case, but this bill basically would reverse the opinion of the court there and basically put into Maryland law the views of the dissent in that case. And I think that was an issue that you all monitored very closely. Dennis did a good job, I think, educating the finance committee there, but I don't know if we can talk about that. I'd like to sort of maybe, because I would suspect that the AG is not going to, I suspect he may bring it back, but I have not had a conversation with him personally. Finally, we obviously have a presidential election next week, but the fact is, as soon as the presidential's behind us, you're going to start to hear rumblings about what the landscape's going to look like in Maryland in 2022. Whether it's, you're going to start hearing people running for different offices, statewide offices. And another big issue in 2021 will be, that's the year we're going to have to take up redistricting. So the maps for Congress, for state Senate seats, for the House of Delegates seats, all those lines will be taken up in 2021. And so this is the first time we've done it with a Republican governor with a Democratic legislature. Last time we did it, O'Malley was governor, and Ehrlich didn't really get a shot at doing this when he was governor. So this is going to be very interesting to see where the boundaries lie, again, for both Congress and for the states. And at the same time, we're going to have a open seat for governor, maybe an open seat for state comptroller, and maybe even an open seat for attorney general. We'll see. But all the statewide offices could be open. So you're going to, when we get to 2021, that's going to sort of kick into high gear. So keep an eye on that. Dennis, I know we had a pretty brief time today, so I don't want to go on too much because I really like doing these calls so I can get a little Q&A feedback, what's on everybody else on your mind rather than what I'm yapping about.
Thank you, Brian. That was really a great overview of what to anticipate with the session coming up. I had just one quick question with regard to unemployment insurance. Because of COVID claims, a number of businesses are receiving increases in their premium, their rating premium based on experience. Do you see any legislative action to try to correct that?
Yeah, well, so the unemployment insurance issue is complicated. So first of all, the first question for us as a state is, will our uninsurance trust fund stay solvent? Okay, right. So we still have money in a balance there, but what has happened is under the CARES Act, the federal government made an offer to the states. We thought it would be like grants back to the states, but we can get a interest-free loan from the feds to replenish our unemployment insurance trust fund. And Maryland is going ahead and doing that. And that's really comes from our Department of Labor. So we had until December 31st, we're putting our application in. Again, it's an interest-free loan, so the money's going to have to be paid back another, but we don't really have any choice. So to do that, we again had hoped that it was a grant, but it's going to be, so we're going to be solvent. Now on the issue of the experience rates and level one, the good thing about Maryland, which is better than most of the country, we base our experience rate on a 3-year average. It's not a year-to-year kind of thing. Most states, a lot of states go year-to-year based on the experience rate, which really makes it volatile in this kind of climate because we're in and by the way, the last 5 years, because unemployment's been so low, we have been at the low, our business has been at the lowest possible table there is for the last 5 years straight. Now, obviously this is changing things, but even now, because of the 3-year averaging, the hit is not going to be, the potential hit is not going to be what it might otherwise have been. So yes, so the same small business group that I talked about, caucus, that I'm part of, and that would require any change in how we compute the experience rate or the hit on, that would require legislative action. That's not something the governor or Department of Labor can do. So I think that is an issue that's going to be, and that would come to the Finance Committee. So we'll have to see, but I just a couple of things. Our solvency is not a problem because of the interest-free loan, and number two, the hit isn't as bad as it otherwise might be because of the 3-year averaging that we get to do in Maryland. That's not the case in many states.
I do know a number of businesses are already receiving notice that they have a spike, in their premium. Do you see that reversing?
Well, we could. Everything's off the table. I think part of it would. I hate to be a broken record, but part of it is when we get back to January, what's the economic landscape of our state?
Right.
It's going to be a situation where it's a spike that we think is a 1-year situation that isn't going to last, or have we done some permanent damage where? So I think we're going to have to look at the whole picture here, and then also gauge when you say a spike, as I said, because of the 3-year averaging, how big a spike are we talking about? Is it short term versus long term? Because if we make that change, then we could still then run into problems on the solvency side of things. So you got to be careful there. You got to be careful. Right. You need money to pay claims, so the money has to come from somewhere. And so I think that's all on the table, and it depends a little bit on the economic landscape as we see it when we're there in January.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful. I know Brian's got limited time here. I know some members, I'm sure, have a question or two they'd like to ask you. Anybody?
You have to unmute yourself because everybody's muted right now if you want to ask a question.
Mr. Fellman, this is Tim Goff here. I'm the Vice Chair of the Legislative Committee for the Maryland Mortgage Bankers and Brokers. You mentioned the Senate President's limiting the amount of bills that can be drafted and submitted this year. There's been some talk about whether that's constitutional. Have you heard anyone that may rebut that or try to end around that?
I have not. Truthfully, that, and first of all, let me be clear, that's only right now, as of right now, that's only on the senators. The House doesn't have a cap, so I'll just throw that out. So any House member, they're going to have trouble getting a cross-filed Senate bill, but that does not preclude the House members as of right now from putting in a 100 bill or whatever. So there's that. And in many states, they have caps just like that. I wouldn't say we're an anomaly, but in many states, so I would think that's just a Senate rule. This isn't a law. We're not passing a law. I don't know how you can challenge. I think it would be, and I'm a lawyer, but I think it would be very difficult to argue that a bill, that's something that's just a Senate rule, doesn't even apply to the House, isn't a law, just a rule, would be unconstitutional. But that's interesting. I have not heard that, but can't say there's nothing to it, other than I know a lot of my colleagues in other states, because we compare notes, they have those kinds of caps. In fact, that's been proposed before. I'm sure somebody's run it by the Attorney General, but again, it's not a law, so I don't know how it's just a rule, housekeeping rule.
Yeah, I think the discussion has been kind of an artificial limit with once a legislator exceeded X amount of legislative initiatives, other bills would go to the Rules Committee. And, administratively, they could just stay there depending on the issues or be reassigned to a standing committee.
I mean, the bigger constitutional issue we've been dealing with is in Maryland, this idea of, do we have to physically be in Annapolis to vote on a bill?
Right.
And that one is actually way more complicated because we have some weird language in our Constitution talking about having to be in Annapolis. So you're going to see us, we can do all kinds of things in committee. Apparently we can do Zoom voting.
Right.
But to talk about the final third reader vote on the floor of the Senate, apparently we have to physically be in Annapolis to do that. Now, we don't necessarily have to be physically in the Senate chamber. And that's been the big discussion about the constitutional weirdness of our, of how we're going to do business is, do we all have to physically be in the chamber? Do we have to physically be in Annapolis? And so even some of this stuff, we may have to be in our offices in the Senate office building, but we're in Annapolis. So, but I haven't heard any constitutional issue relating to cap. But yeah, I think there's But again, right now, there's no problem with the House. So, you know, just because you don't have a putting in the bill, you can still get a House a delegate to put the bill in. So.
Right.
Hey, Brian, we have one question on the chat from Dennis Sullivan, and he says, who will be the next president and what impact will that have on Maryland?
Well, I'm not going to weigh in on the presidential, you know, it'll play out now, but I do think it has some implications for certain areas. You know, you just have to, honestly, so my committee, I mean, I think it has potential huge impact on the finance committee. Two of the biggest subject areas we have is healthcare policy and energy policy. Okay, that's all within the jurisdiction of the Senate Finance Committee. So I mentioned earlier the Affordable Care Act, you know, where that goes and how that plays out probably is going to depend on who the administration is and all that. Because we've done some pretty creative things the last few years in Maryland on the healthcare space. And secondly, energy policy. Vice President Biden's talking a lot about clean energy, and a big plan that he would roll out in the first 100 days about renewable energy, solar. And so I was the sponsor 2 years ago of the Maryland Clean Energy Jobs Act. You may have read about. It's going to take us to renewable energy in Maryland by 2030, about 50%. So, you know, those are the kinds of issues that I think do have, I will say, upside economic potential. So two things about Maryland on the economy I'm just going to put out there. Because one of the things about COVID, I represent the I-270 corridor in Maryland, and we have all these biotech companies. And you talk about, you know, research for vaccines and 270 and economic development. We have a lot of potential here in Maryland between having NIH here and Hopkins, and a lot of the companies. We got $3 billion of 40 of our biotech companies here along the 270 corridor just right now for COVID related stuff. So this has been a big kind of economic job creator for my part of Montgomery County. Same thing on clean energy. We have a lot of upside potential in terms of solar, offshore wind, and all the rest if we have, you know, some help from the Fed. So I think those are a couple of areas that I would be looking at from a purely Senate Finance Committee standpoint in terms of some potential upside, again, economic opportunities for our state, because those are two areas that I think biotech, life sciences, and energy, I think we could actually do really well, entire state, but particularly maybe my part of the state. And these are private sector jobs. You know, I have to just say we need to continue to move away from our dependence on federal government and federal jobs and diversify our private sector economic portfolio. That's why we made a big play for Amazon headquarters here. We made a big play to keep Marriott Global headquarters, you know, in my district. You know, these are big entities that have a lot of good things going on, and for the real estate industry, and having Amazon, or even over in Virginia, has some byproduct over in the Maryland side of the river in terms of real estate and economic development and all the rest. We can just figure out how to deal with our transportation congestion problem. Then I think Maryland still, we're right now, you know, our unemployment rate last book number was 6.9%. We're still 15, 20% below the national average. And if we can come out of it, I think we'll be positioned better than most states, most parts of the country, to come out robustly. But, you know, we do still have to play our cards right. And so back on the presidential, yeah, it does matter, you know, not even who the president is, who's running the agencies, what are sort of the priorities, but it also matters what the makeup of the United States Congress is, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I will, yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Great. Last question for Brian, or comment? All right.
I would like to comment and thank both of you, because very informative, and we appreciate the time you've taken to educate us a little bit further.
Yeah, well, thank you again. I you know, 2 months went by quickly, and in 2 months from now, you know, I'll be moving to a new house, and we'll be starting. So I'm going to try to put 2020 behind me, like I think the rest of the country.
Yeah, there's a long line behind you, Brian.
But I'm hopeful, you know, 2021 session, again, I'll just reiterate, Dennis does a fantastic job. the former chair, and most of you, Dennis is the former chair of the Senate Finance Committee in a prior life before he was doing this.
We lost him.
Oh, I think Senator Fellman froze.
Dennis, thanks for coordinating this. Appreciate it. Very
Yeah.
helpful.
No problem. You know, as we move closer to the session, and we'll do our best to keep you updated. There's still a lot of logistic oriented questions that need to be resolved. I had heard somewhat little differently than Brian that they need to be in the Senate chamber to vote. Just can't be in Annapolis. So he's
Anyway,
back.
it seemed like I had a connectivity problem there, Dennis. I was talking about how great you were. Did you get that part before the?
That's what probably happened. That knocked you off the internet, you know, with a
Okay.
statement like that.
Okay.
I just wanted to say we really appreciate you taking time to be with us. We'll stay in contact with you. We've got some issues that we may want to discuss as we get closer to the session, but you know, appreciate your willingness to speak out and give us some insight on what's going on. It's very helpful.
Yeah, and let me just also say this: if anybody, you can go through Dennis, but if anybody wants to reach out to me, directly too, just shoot me an email if something specific comes up individually, with whatever you all are dealing with. You shoot me a note. I'd be happy if I can help out, or at least figure out somebody who can help you out. Don't hesitate to do that. Just shoot me an email. Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.